Well, welcome to a late starting, but we have a reason for that. And all of that's going to become clear really soon. Our late starting church AV professional meeting. I want to thank my co host for joining. We have Corel, we have Colin, and we have Alex. All the lower thirds and stuff will come up later. We'll get to last names and stuff. Listen, I'm a bit distraught because this did not start out the way it was planned, which is a perfect intro to our talk today. Okay. So let me explain to you what I was trying to do. I have my setup here. I've been running for quite a while, and I have multiple computers to feed into an ATEM, which feeds into a computer so we can stream. Computers have been working fine for about 5 weeks now. Today, I decide to move a couple of things over, maybe add something, maybe have an overhead mic, just improve the setup, bring a light in, change around so that things look a little better. Laptop doesn't work. The HDMI out just stops. Tried 5 different cables, tried configuration. I even have an up-down converter so the signal not to work. So here we go with our setup. So let me bring my fellow technicians in because this is a setup that we all have encountered before. This wasn't the topic for today's talk, but since we're in it, let's just go ahead and talk about it. So I'm going to bring my technicians in and let's talk about it. How would y'all handle that? We're 5 minutes to showtime. I'm not even using the camera I wanted to use because that requires NDI and I have to use a new laptop and the new laptop doesn't have NDI on it. So how would you guys fix that? Take down.
Alan, you want to take that one?
Adapt. Plan, test, adapt. Rinse, cycle, repeat. So, for instance, let me give you guys a story. There's this guy named Robert Baker that hosts this wonderful show on YouTube out of the goodness of his own heart. And he asked his friends in the area that were in the business, hey, why don't you join me for this show? And so the first episode, was graciously hosted by one of our church employees who used one of our global church's accounts to help us get connected and what have you. And they have all the bells and whistles. So, my $10,000 V1U, old tape-based, if you remember what videotape was, a videotape camera that happened to have an HDMI port on it. That's great. I think we mentioned in the first show, really old thing that you can find on eBay for a couple $100, right? That going into an ATEM Mini, which of course is new, which is acting as a ingest device for Zoom. So I'm actually using my desktop computer. And that was the quickest workflow I could do. And I was going to use like a lavalier mic and all that stuff. And I said, you know what, keep it simple because how would I hear everybody? We'd have not have to worry about the mix minds and all that stuff. I have this beautiful, Sennheiser gaming headset here that's USB based. And in Zoom, you can just tell it, hey, I'm taking my video from the ATEM Mini, the audio from the Sennheiser headset, and it's sending me back the audio through the headphones. So that's what I did to adapt to our changing circumstances. But how did it go for you, Robert?
Well, it didn't go as well as I would have liked. First of all, I did have to switch out computers, but that meant my entire setup on the computer now has to change. So I had an overhead mic to use. I had the same type of setup. I had a lot of things. So I had an interface ready to go into my laptop. This new laptop has no interface drivers. So that's not just a quick swap. But, I do have my headset popped in. You can hear me. And that's the whole point, isn't it? So you can hear us. So I borrowed a laptop. Now, this laptop doesn't go out at 1080p, 1080i, which is what we're actually using, but it doesn't go out at 1080 at all. it's a, was it a 1384? You know, that really weird in between resolution. But thankfully, I had an extra one, popped it, the up down converter, cross converter, so that I can get to my ATEM at 1080i. So I use that. But this means that my beautiful Sony BRC 4000, I think, camera, I can't use. I have to use the camera on the laptop.
Welcome to the world of the rest of us. I'm just saying.
But
I mean, it's a big thing. I mean, use what you have, right? The other day, I sat down and realized that what I thought was a phone call was actually a video chat, as everything seems to be these days. And well, you know, I was listening in, and they're like, okay, yeah, the AV guy can't have video on his call. You know, it's just his name there. That seems kind of cheesy. So I said, okay, what can I do without leaving my seat? I go, let's see if you're bad. Okay, so as you know, until I can't remember when the cutoff date is, but New Tech is offering their NDI Cam HX or NDI HX Cam, can't remember the name, and their NDI capture software. It's iOS only, but they're offering it for free. I think they were like $20 applications or what have you. All right.
Oh.
Right. iPhones have amazing processing on them. It's a really expensive camera, but you know, it could do a whole bunch of other things too. But as a camera, it is awesome. So I said, hey, let me try this application. I turned it on. I went into Zoom's configuration, said, okay, I want my audio and video to come from and go to the iPhone. And away you went. I had my entire setup that I needed for that call, right? The reason I didn't do it today, you know, because it's really the fastest way to get into a Zoom call if you really don't have any infrastructure, you know, outside of your computer or your laptop, if it doesn't have a webcam or you have headphones and all that other stuff, is because holding your camera for an extended amount of time is a real pain, right? So I have a tripod for that. Here's the only other problem. This little one, come here, who just snuck into my office, this little one thinks that my iPhone tripod is an octopus, right? And likes to play with it. So I have no idea where it is. So find daddy's tripod, okay? Wherever you put it, so I can show the lovely people online. See you, son. Close the door.
That's the nature of, hey, listen, that's the way the world is now. Now, you two don't have that issue, but in truth, my children help me in this endeavor. My daughter right now is doing the switching. I always say she's one of the best camera people I ever know, but she helps me out with all these productions because the world has changed. And like you said, I'm not going to say use what you have around you as if you're going to talk about your children that way. Use what you have around you, but utilize the tools that are most readily available to you. Isn't that right, gentlemen?
Alex, don't you have a story?
I have a story. It's not a very exciting story. I used to have a microphone that plugged into this headset. Where is it? It's noise canceling. It's flexible. It plugs into the side of this headset, and it stopped working. So I was in the middle of a conference call, and they're like, "We're getting static on your mic." So I'm like, "Okay." So I tried to order another one on Amazon, and it didn't work. So what am I talking to you with today? I'm talking to you with the Rode mic that I happened to buy for my camera the other day. But it's nice because it has USB connectivity, and it also has 3.5 millimeter output, so I can plug it into my work machine because I actually don't have webcam or video conferencing stuff for that. So instead of using my headset, I use this for audio to listen to, and then I've been talking through my mic. So it's flexible.
Well, there you go.
You adapt.
Yeah.
Speaking of
adapters.
Cell phone adapters, I actually have a cell phone clip that goes to a 1/4-20 screw that I actually have on I have a 1/4-20 to 5/8 adapter for a mic stand. So I'm using a regular boom mic stand. I do the adapter, go in the 1/4-20, mount my phone in here, and I actually use this sometimes. Although right now I'm using this to hold my microphone, but just another option.
I mean, isn't that in reality, a lot of us spend our church days running around fixing things that not only did we not know was broken, because we don't work there full time. We don't work at our AV jobs. We're mostly volunteers. As a matter of fact, all four of us are volunteers, correct? So we're not employed by our churches to do things. Sometimes we don't find out things are broken until the day of service, especially when we get things last minute. See, that can segue into a whole different story, because I started this process of getting set up for a 7 o'clock show at 5 o'clock. So even though it sounds like, hey, why did you wait so late to find out if your computer worked? I did a show this morning at 11 o'clock and everything worked fine. But I moved, well, as we discussed earlier, I installed a driver for something else, and that may have knocked out the video driver. And then, of course, the computer decided to do a Windows 10 update in the middle of my rebooting. And so these things happen. What can we do to minimize? Now, as professionals, we also do this professionally. So we know about pre-production meetings. We know about getting assets early so we can test it and make sure they run. But what else can we do in our church setting to minimize these? Can you grab a laptop from your car? Can you grab this cable from the room downstairs so that we can get this thing going?
I think having cables in general is always a good way to be prepared. Have extras. They fail. There are issues with them. Having extras is the way to go. It's like number one in troubleshooting. Is the cable a problem? Yes or no? If you can't check that box, you're in dire straits. It very well could be a poor connection that's stopping you from doing what you need to.
Also, not to cut you off, Alex, every adapter known to man, you need to own. I don't care how obscure it is. BNC to RCA, own it. RCA to RCA, own it. 1/4 inch to 1/8. Just go buy it. I don't care if you don't think you need it. You will need it. Any other cables? Anything else, you guys?
I mean, it just speaks to the core issue, right? Whenever you're going into a situation, you have to be able to know, hey, there's going to come a time where I'm going to need to have this or this or this or this. And it's usually you end up kicking yourself after the situation happens instead of, being like, oh, hey, yeah, I can do that. Okay, so let me pull back, my cover today, right? I had to troubleshoot someone else's situation on their home stereo system today, and I could have benefited from a couple of things. I could have benefited from the RCA to RCA barrel that you just showed. Okay,
which should be obsolete by this time, right?
But the thing is, their receiver that they were using for their system, which I won't name the manufacturer, is RCA based. It's old. It's a really old receiver, and there was no way of getting the audio from the television they were using to that receiver, except for over the digital line. But then here was the key thing: the digital line doesn't work because you can assign it to a particular function on one of the boxes. So it could be under the TV, it could be under the satellite, it could be under an aux. And you can assign where it goes. And then having to figure that stuff out came to looking at the manual and certain things. So what am I getting at? Troubleshooting is always going to be troublesome, and you never really know where the problem lies. And let me just say this. When I fixed the problem for the person that was having the issue, they were well relieved. But I could have had this job done a lot faster had I had my bag of tricks.
Mm-hmm.
Your point.
I will say this though.
Mm-hmm.
I don't push software updates unless I know I have time to make sure I can roll my system back. Backup, update. Just because software is interesting like that.
There's this one time when this guy just showed up to a church. you know, it wasn't his church, and he decided, you know what, he's going to push a software update like an hour before their afternoon event. I don't know why they let him. You know, but yeah, I know they had to find like a arcane cable, a USB cable from like 1922 to make the update work properly, and no one had that cable, or maybe someone had one on a keychain or in the wheel well of their car or something. But that sort of thing can be stressful. You know, you're absolutely right. You know, no last minute changes. And my thing to add to the conversation is, you know, aside from, you know, plan, test, execute, is always have a backup, some redundancy.
Yep.
And that could be something as simple as, and you know, planning comes into this too. If you have, for example, an RTMP encoder on your phone, like Wowza has one that's pretty good. You can just, you know, stream from your cameras, your phone's camera. Those URLs are very long. You don't want to be there trying to type in either a very long URL or a very long streaming key when you're in a panic because something didn't fail or something broke, or, you know, something wasn't ready or what have you. You want to have it there ready to go, even if it's in an email or in a note or what have you, that you can just cut and paste it into the right field, because you're going to make mistakes typing that in. You're going to get frustrated, you know. Or, you know, if you have an application, like say you had a spare copy of vmix. Vmix is great, right, with the settings on it already pre-populated, that you can, you know, stick in a USB compatible device, whether it be a webcam or an ATEM mini or some other UVC device, what have you, that it's ready and you're not fumbling with all that stuff. Or, you know, just be able to, for instance, Robert's pretty much doing an off-site network operations center. Have someone you can call to say, hey, look, can you play out something to our stream, you know, while we fix this? Right. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do, but the whole point is design some kind of contingency well in advance of having to use it.
Being prepared for the unexpected, which is a difficult thing to say. If I recall that story correctly, when the update happened, they said, "Hey, there's a new update." I think we were an hour out from the program, and it said,
It's
"Hey,
that
there's
long.
this." Listen, I'm going to say there was an hour. It may not have been an hour because we were sweating.
I'm sure it felt longer than an hour when you were doing it.
No, it felt a lot shorter than an hour. So we said, hey, there's an update, but we had forgotten the entire update process. Did I say we? We're relaying a story here. We're relaying a story about what happened. So
Yeah, I
these
don't know.
gentlemen, don't know who it was. These
Yeah.
gentlemen decided to update the ATEM, which we were using to stream the service. And the ATEM was fine. It just takes a USB. It was just the software on the machine. So we had a USC B, a USB B, the big fat dongle, into USB A. Pretty simple. Plug that in, did the update fine. We also had a Surface. The switching surface required USB Mini to USB A.
Oh,
We had one this long, wouldn't fit. So we scrambled around the entire church. Now, by this time, we're 30 minutes out, scrambled around the church. And the problem is, without both of them being synced with firmware updates, it doesn't work. Now, we could have just gone software based, but our volunteers didn't know how to use it. They're only used to the Surface. So we finally, because I try to have cables everywhere, I had one in the car. I think we got it up 5 minutes before showtime. I mean, these gentlemen got it up 5 minutes. Okay? So you are 100% right. Under no circumstances do you update any firmware 2, 3, 4 hours before a show.
Unless you have to.
Yes, unless you have to. Yeah, there are times where you may have to, but you got to keep those times to a minimum.
Absolutely.
You know, so Do you have any questions, Colin? Any questions come in about the topics we're covering?
Oh, I'm supposed to be watching that? Oh boy, I'm not doing my job.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat. There are no questions that came in right now, but you know, I think one of the big things that we have to take away from this discussion is, you know, if you fail to plan, you can pretty much plan on failing.
Yes.
You know, I mean, that's literally what it comes down to. Too many times where, you know, we are so caught up in the details of such and such didn't give me this, and such and that, and then we're having to scramble to try to put things together. But then you add the technical failures on top of that, and then that just makes the snowball just get bigger until it turns into a thing that can crush you. So, you know, the big thing is and this is the thing for my philosophy, right? My best way of playing defense is playing a very good offense.
Mm.
And by trying to make sure that I stay on top of the details that I can control, as in the equipment, wherever I need to focus, if I need to frequency coordinate my wireless mics, if I need to test out all my HDMI connections or SDI connections to verify that they're going to the right sources, you know, whatever we have to do in order to test everything, we're making sure we try to do that. Because, you know, then when somebody comes in and says, oh, hey, I have a last minute presentation. Okay, I can take that because I already know my stuff is working. I've already double checked it, triple checked it even if I have to. And there are times where we do get a surprise. Somebody decided, oh, hey, I needed to plug in my laptop up on the stage, so I unplugged this power strip up there. I don't think it does anything. What? So there are times where things like that will happen, but you know, you at least can focus your attention to that specifically if you can try to take out all the rest of the other things that you know you can control.
Right.
I think that's a big takeaway.
Right.
So what's actually on the agenda for today?
Well, you know, I had a couple of questions and I just rebooted the computer that the questions were on, but there was one specific one that I wanted to talk to you guys about, especially our audio guys. There've been a couple of drive-in churches, okay, where they set up their equipment, cars come in because of, you know, social distances, and they still want that we're at the church feeling. Now, I don't think any of our churches have done it, but what is your opinion on a drive-in church, knowing that you might be one of the people setting it up or even coordinating the setup? What is your opinion about the drive-in churches?
How are we accommodating that? You know, I mean,
I have so many questions.
Yeah.
You start with questions. So are we carting this ourselves? How far do we have to go? Do we have power? Can we waterproof this? Because if it rains, are you ready to lose all your equipment if we have a short or a ground fault or something that, you know, happens if we don't waterproof? You know, what kind of coverage are we trying to get? Do we need to put in, you know, fills for the back sections? How many people do we expect? How big's the parking lot? Are we going to have noise complaints or issues with the neighbors that don't especially share our zeal for what our music is? Are we going to have a full band? If we're doing something, are the vocalists going to have practice and sound check? They're not the same thing, by the way. Practice and sound check are not.
Oh, okay. That's a conversation for a whole other day.
That's a different thing. So yeah, these are the questions that come to my mind immediately. But
I mean, there's the other side too, which is like, okay, so you've got the live PA situation, or, you know, what came to my mind is I've seen some folks that have some low-powered radio stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So using that and then letting people tune in over the radio, but the question is how much power does that radio system have? You know, and other little things that may not be too big to somebody, but when the FCC comes knocking,
you can actually. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. So it was brought up on one of the webinars from NAD that was talking about that. It is, you can get systems that are perfectly fine that meet the FCC requirements, and that aren't a problem. The answer to that, though, is to prevent us all from having legal issues is to consult your local guidelines and follow all of those things to the T. And yeah. it's doable. I mean, I think with anything though, you got to do your homework.
Definitely.
People propose ideas and they have no clue, not a single clue what the work is going to be. Like, yeah.
Well, I've given it some thought. I actually got a call this week from someone who was on the chat on our first episode of this, and it's a local church in Silver Spring, Maryland, and they're doing their first drive-in church this Sunday. And interestingly enough, I mean, I had the idea. I'd seen, I think my wife had sent me an article about some churches that were doing the idea, and there's definitely a right way and a wrong way to do it. And of course, this doesn't constitute any sort of legal advice whatsoever, but there is a way to legally transmit your audio to those cars. It's done all the time. There are there are companies that do this for a living. They put up a big screen, right? They want to relive the old drive-in days, and they put up a very low power transmitter, and away they go. And here's the thing: I think PA for a drive-in, not normally, right? But I think in this particular instance, where you want to maximize social distancing by keeping your vents and your windows closed, is that a PA system is an absolutely terrible idea. Because guess what cars are particularly good at doing? Keeping noise out. All right.
True.
Although, as a side point, if you're looking for a great place to record your cell phone video, if you have to do something for your service and you don't have a quiet place to go, you can go to your car. I'm going to plug that real quick.
And the more luxury your car is, the difference between a non-luxury car and a luxury car is that a luxury car has more styrofoam in it. And instead of not painting that styrofoam, they paint it black. And once you start looking at a luxury car, you're going to open up the door and look in between. You're going to start laughing because you're going to be like, wait a second. I'm paying an extra 20 grand for black painted styrofoam, but it makes your car sound lovely. And when you close the door, you get that thump, right? Right. But that absolutely kills you. You're going to have to push so many decibels, right? In that drive-in theater, you're going to disturb the neighbors, the geese, the wildlife, everything for miles to be at an intelligible level inside your vehicle. So bad idea. Now, also getting in trouble with the FCC that actually can impose criminal penalties for a high-powered transmission, or essentially Sunday morning pirate radio, is also a bad idea. But what is a good idea is what this church in Silver Spring is doing, is said, we don't know any of this stuff. We're going to hire a professional sound company that, guess what? They're completely out of work because there's no live production going on. Heck, this is a revenue stream for them. They know how to do this. They've figured it out. They're using the proper equipment. They know the rules that you can't transmit past a 200-foot radius. They can design out a plot and what have you and make it work. I think that's great. It takes stress off of the in-house AV team and the volunteers and what have you, and you get it done. Right. Also, in Maryland, I can't speak, of course, anyone can watch this from anywhere, but in Maryland, where we're all located right now, it has been specifically addressed by the governor and by the Maryland State Police that this activity is allowed. Right, it's permissible to the churches to do it. So if you do it right, it's great. If you do it wrong, not so much. But some churches have the staff, right? They have paid AV staff. They have dedicated professionals. They have lay people that, heck, just don't have the work and they can dedicate time to it. It can be done. It can also be outsourced.
My former church in Florida has done this. Now, Florida, you have to understand, is a completely different climate. That's one. But you also have to remember, at 3:00 every day it rains. So if you can get the equipment back inside by 3:00, that may cover Alex's point about the weather. But you do have to keep in consideration, what's your alternative? If it does rain that day, or if there is some big issue, what is your backup? I mean, that's what we started talking about. What is your plan for backup? Personally, in Maryland, I think your idea, Colin, is the best. Hire someone who does this consistently. If you're asking church people to do it, you're asking them to get out there 2 hours ahead of time, at least, so that they can get set up. And then you're asking those same people to stay another hour and a half to 2.5 hours afterwards to tear down. So their day of rest is now thrown out the window. Those are things I think you do have to relay to administration, just like Alex said, because the people asking for it may not fully understand the amount of work it takes. We've done churches in the park before, and once again, the questions are: how many singers? How many musicians? Because each one of those is a different cable, which changes your mixer, which changes the output. How many people? We set up for a church in the park, and they thought it was going to be this many people. They bought a tent. What was it? A 40 by 30 tent. And then we had people on the outside sitting because they filled up that tent quickly. And the people on the outside were saying, we can't hear anything because all the speakers are pointed in. So it's things like that you, once again, prepare. We had extra speakers. We can put them up. The people we were working with are knowledgeable. But if you're not familiar with these things, they're more trouble than they're worth. All right. Thank you, guys. Any questions come in just yet?
Nope, the queue is empty.
All right. And my computer's still coming up. So, I mean, one of the
Windows updates.
one of the other things that we had talked about was audio, Zoom audio being a big thing. Sometimes presenters will log into Zoom and they won't have their mic, their microphone set up, their speaker set up. They can hear you, but you can't hear them, or vice versa. How do you guys help troubleshoot? Because I know each of you hosts some of these meetings. How do you guys help people through these type of challenges?
So I guess I'll take that one first. So the first thing we do is we plan to have a pre-meeting the day before we're going to do the live. If not before, it depends on how big it's going to be. So if we have a situation where we're going to have, several people on the call, maybe 7 or 8, and we need to be intricate about it, then we'll usually get everybody in and do the call the day before. If it's just one person, maybe a few hours before, just to make sure that we're solid and that they have everything set up. So the key thing though is, providing contact information, numbers, whatever, email, and just trying to get protocol out there with, a list of things to consider, lighting situations, but in particular with the audio, we always suggest, a few basic rudimentary things. Number one, like Colin pointed out earlier in this call, he's got a headset that's got a dedicated speaker setup, for his ears that is coupled away from his microphone. So the two feeds are independent of each other. He's not got like a speaker sitting on the table with the active microphone in there and hoping to God and praying that, that things are not gonna, feed back. And I think that's key. So, if you can at all do that first, and make sure that you have a reliable setup. I mean, for me right now, I'm not, I don't have any wires. You guys don't see any headset on me. I'm using a laptop straight up, with the integrated microphone and speaker. But the software is handling the stuff for me here. And that's helpful, but just trying to make sure you get rid of any places where you can have the feedback loops happening. And then there's some settings that you can also tweak within the software for the client that may allow you to have a little bit more control over how it sounds.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? I think one of the major things I've seen, especially when it comes to people connecting, and these are people who connect on a regular basis, is sometimes as technicians, we think things are fairly simple. Oh, just go here, click on this, click on that, and you'll be fine. I know in Zoom specifically, we've had trouble just trying to use the same terminology with people. So when we go, let me see, go to the quad screen because I want to see if I can show it. All right. So what do you guys call the accent next to the mute or the video button. What do you guys call that?
I always usually just tell people to go to the arrow next to the microphone. At the
Okay.
bottom of the page. That's what I tell them.
One vote for arrow.
I would probably go with arrow.
Okay.
If they know what it is, and I know they know, then I will say the menu next to that, but I usually assume they don't.
Okay. Colin?
Well, I know you're strange, so I'm going to say chevron.
Chevron. Okay. Chevron, I honestly wouldn't use. But I use caret because I used to, way back in the day for programming, it's called a caret. If I learned French when I was younger, I might call it an accent. I forget if it's accent aigu, accent grave. It's one of those.
It's neither if it's like that.
No, right. But it's accent grave. That's what it is. You're right. But, that's because of my history. So I call it caret, and people don't understand what I'm talking about. An arrow, I wouldn't call it that, but it makes much more sense because it is pointing in a particular direction. So terminology matters. So you tell them click on arrow and then click on audio settings. And a lot of times they're saying, where? I don't see it. And then you realize if they're on an iPad, it looks different. If they're on a desktop, it may look different. If they're using the straight web interface, it looks different. So now you got to worry about, okay, what are they using? How do they access the same thing? All of a sudden, you're all over the place trying to explain something to them that they can't see. Because one of the big problems is Zoom. You say, okay, just share your screen, I'll see. But Zoom is smart enough to hide all of that when someone shares their screen.
Yeah. I mean, I actually talked someone through how to start a Zoom call, share their screen, and play a video. And they had never really used Zoom to do that before.
That's good.
It only took me an hour and some change. It was a labor of love. And I'm just saying it can be done if the party is willing, but I use FaceTime to facilitate being able to see the screen. It's not cheating. It's leveraging the tools that you have at your disposal, right?
Yep.
So the biggest challenge is I don't know how to tell you how to share your screen, so I'm going to find a way of getting that visual. In general, when it comes to teaching people things, I tend to go subscribe to the use media option. If I can preempt some of that and just do a screencast of me doing it and send that to people and say, hey, this is how you do it, depending on what it is, if I have the foresight to say, oh, I think there's going to be a problem, let me make this quick video, it's probably going to be way easier for me to kind of show it and just get them calibrated. That is another tool at your disposal. It doesn't help you when you're at the nth hour, but if you're going ahead of time and you're like, you know what, I've got a little bit more time to prep for this, let me create this content, make this nugget available, I can just send it to them. That's one way of getting around it.
Right.
That does make sense.
And that's where the pre-planning comes in big time, because for us doing for church service, right, doing the call the day before, we're actually going to do the call the next day. I mean, we've navigated around, like somebody didn't have the client installed on the machine and they needed to do it, but then they needed their administrator password, which, in this case, it was the parent had, and we needed to help them work through that. Or, they're this one's rough. Having sound check through Zoom. How does my audio sound? And it's a matter of moving the phone forward or backward or speaker or whatever they're using and trying to blend with whatever headset they've got going on or microphone.
So that's an interesting conversation. I don't want to hijack this one, but I feel like that's something that we could really help people out. I'm a musician. I'm trying to do special music. Right now I'm playing a boombox into my microphone as I sing. Are there nice alternatives out there to get the audio synced together so that people could have it? That's something that we could probably put a pin in and think about for the next time.
There are actually applications out there. And it sort of works kind of like your frame sync in theory and concept, where, if you look at a piece of written music, right, you know what the note structure is, right? You know how many beats per bar, right? You know what the tempo is, right? It doesn't really matter when you start if you start when the last person starts. And then when the last person starts, you sync up where all the other people started before. That's exactly how a video frame sync works, right? You know, whenever that scan line, well, I guess you don't really have scan lines that more or like that anymore, but you know, whenever you first started capturing that frame, and the other person or other device or camera started capturing that frame, and then you delay to the slowest capture device and you sync them up so that everyone's essentially marching to the tune of the same thing with a sheet or a score, right? You're going to the same beat, right? Now, if people are going at different tempos, you're sunk, right? So you might want to have a you know, the advantage of a click track or what have you. And we can put it in the notes because there's an application that actually does this. But if everyone is in sync as far as being on beat for that particular passage or bar or measure of music, you can always sync them up to the slowest person and then play it out. So the delay is going to be however slow or late that last person in that ensemble is. So it is doable, but you really have to train the people to use that software and to play along with it. And it usually helps if the people have, you know, they're musicians and they know music theory and, you know, they're actually playing along with the click track or beat or whatever, or metronome or what have you. But to go back to what Carol was saying, there was a question there from Jason Glouden. I've done a pre-test the day before with a Zoom caller that then couldn't get the audio enabled on their phone the next day. Next time I'm going to have them call in on the phone.
Yeah. We've
option.
had to do that before as well, where their video was live, but they were still on their phone. It's just the nature of technology. Like I said, my laptop has been working fine for, what is it, 5 weeks now? Absolutely fine. And today it just stopped working and it just would not work. So having those backups in place, even with a pretest, there's another mention before, there's another mention that said they try to do a 1 hour call time so that they can test all these things. Now, because we're dealing with church folk, we do a half an hour call time because trying to get them there an hour ahead of time is just, whew. But those concepts do make sense. Try to get the people in early, try to test the things out early. But you also have to have a contingency for when they fail. Because all of us over the years have made a lot of money because these things fail. It goes back to your troubleshooting, Corral. It's just, that's part of the business. If you know how to troubleshoot well, you'll go a lot further than if you don't know how to troubleshoot and you panic the first time that problem happens.
And then know the platform too, which is also a big thing because, like, I'll give you an example. Okay, so you know, I work for this big world church organization that just recently had some big time meetings, and knowing the limitations of the software platform, we had to do a couple of things to circumvent some of the issues. So one of the ones that's noted, like especially like within Zoom, is that they have an auto correcting feature, which will bring your audio level up and down comparatively to where
auto gain control. AGCs of the devil.
Yeah.
No comments. But I think the big thing here is that we had to work around it. So what we had to do was we had a couple of different things. I had presentations that I had to show from like PowerPoint and Keynote, right? And then I also had video playback that I had to do. But how did I accomplish either one? Well, I didn't do everything on the same machine. I did the presentations from the laptop that I had called in with to basically make my life easier there. And why did I do that? Because it was already in the call and I could make it simple and it was easy to just change the slides. But when it came down to the playback of video, there was an issue playing back of an embedded video that we had in one of the presentations, okay? Because through the share function, it just did not work well, right? And so how did we circumnavigate around that issue with the other presentations that came in? Because this one was the only one that got stuck that way. Well, you know, I use this guy, right? So what this did for me, this is a Blackmagic web presenter. Now it takes in signal over HDMI or SDI, right here in the back, and takes in audio as well, and then it outputs in USB format. Why is that important? Because then the USB format then shows up as a source here in my Zoom as a webcam. And then I was able to then take the audio and video coming from another computer as if it were my webcam from my laptop right here, choose that as the source, and then it pushed it out as if it was my video, like what you're seeing right now, but instead it's the full screen stuff. Now, why did I do that? Because the video playback was so smooth, you couldn't tell that there was any, anything going on there. But when I shared audio from the presentation in that video, it just garbled. It was bad. And so, it's a matter of understanding the platform and how to work within it. And I'm not going to say that's unique to Zoom. I'm sure the other ones do it, although their algorithms may be a little bit different. But it's just something that, when you think through the process, and again, the key thing here is we tried and tested with the technicians that were on this call at least 3 or 4 times before we actually did the actual large call and ran the meeting quite successfully to as I see it.
Mm. Actually, that was a trick that I guess I didn't talk about, but that I used during the last call. So and you're absolutely right, Corral, you kind of picked up on what's actually been, for the last couple of decades, part of the H.2 or H.323 protocol, is that you actually have 2 separate streams. You have one for your PowerPoint type presentation, and you have one for your video. And guess which one takes priority, and guess which one is higher bandwidth? The moving pictures. They assume that all you have to compress are stills, right? You just have some text and so it's really graphic. So you really have 2 streaming channels from all of the legacy equipment, right? Like the Tandbergs and the Ciscos and the Polycoms and the life sizes and all those. And a lot of the newer things are kind of based or modeled after that. So they split up and have dual streams for your presentation and your video conference as well. So what I did last time was I told it, no, I don't want a second stream, right?
Right.
All right. I didn't actually, I know I had the ATEM on my desk, but it was just there to show off. I didn't actually use it. I had it when it went to presentation mode. It took all 3.5 megabits of my video stream for that presentation. So my graphics looked really good. Right. So I could have played video straight. Actually, when we were testing Corel, when I was trying to figure out my audio issues, and you're like, boy, that's playing really smooth. That's exactly what I did. I bumped it to 3.5 megabits and I let it take over my video stream, because you're not looking at me anyways. You don't need both streams. It's just wasting bits, right? I had my secondary, what would have been my secondary stream, take over my primary.
And see, that's the thing, knowing how to make that function and work, because, for us having to troubleshoot or figure this out, we had to do it early and then come up with a solution for how we were going to handle it, and then come to an agreement of, okay, this is the best way to do it. And for us, using this guy, in combination with doing the presentations out of PowerPoint or Keynote or whatever, was just the best way to approach it. And then it allowed me the ability to switch between whichever computer I needed to push that from. And it worked quite well. Although I will say the delay in knowing when to change the slide sometimes killed me, because they'd have to tell me next slide, I'd hit it, and then they would see it and go. So I mean, there's also that. But I mean, for what it is, as long as you can pre-plan and try to hold on to those variables, especially us being technicians, it's easier for us to try to help them along. I mean, one of the other things that we're doing now in our stream for our church now, cutting over to a different topic, is using the ATEM as program feed to the Zoom call that we're in with the participants, so they can see the graphics we're putting up, right, and all that stuff. And then I'm using this web presenter, to actually send that feed out to our live stream setup that we've got.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's one of the programs that we do at our church, is our Sabbath school. And sometimes we'll have people who present and they have pretty big PowerPoints, but they make what I consider as a fatal flaw. They'll get into the PowerPoint, we'll allow them to share their screen. They'll get into PowerPoint, leave the PowerPoint up the whole time. And even though they've moved on to a different topic or someone else wants to talk, their screen share is up there. And as producers and video directors and stuff, that's just terrible. You're not supposed to stay on a shot for 20 minutes. It's just wrong. Okay. It's sort of like jump cuts, but we're not going to talk about that today.
I'm sorry.
So I decided to take over the sharing of the screen. But one of the things I didn't realize is because technically my setup is all dual screens. When I share the screen, it completely messes up. So now I can set it up using NDI, which we're definitely going to talk about one of these days in depth. I can set up NDI to just have a screen, but then those people in the Zoom meeting don't get that 2-page effect. Only the people watching online. Then the Zoom meeting people were complaining, hey, hit F5 so I can get it full screen. So I showed them what it would look like. All they were getting was they were getting not the full screen, they were actually getting the presenter view. It's just because of how I have it set up here. So what you were mentioning is having another laptop or having another device, either the ATEM, to send that shared screen through as a whole different screen so that the Zoom people can see it and the other people can see it. See, it's those type of things that we can talk about to help someone else who's doing a setup. Now, I know everyone doesn't have 3 and 4 switchers just sitting around where they can, drop it in and have everything. But I think it's the idea that there are better ways to do something. And instead of everyone trying to reinvent the wheel, let's just share some of our information and maybe we can make it easier for the next guy.
It's actually funny. I actually do have the schematic of how we have that running right now. If we're interested, I can potentially forge that up and we can show that the next time.
Screen share that.
I mean, yes, I could go through my browser and screen share that, I suppose. But I will say one thing. There is that human aspect. People want to be able to be apprised of what's going on. And for us, we don't have a dedicated producer per se every Sabbath. So we're basically kind of running the show. So we're kind of going on good faith that the participants are going to know when they're up. Oof. And having the program feed has helped a lot because they know, I'm going after this. So for our Zooms, we probably have somewhere between 1.5 second delay tops most of the time.
Really?
So it's actually surprisingly good. So we can switch to them and we have enough buffer time. We just tell the people that when they end, smile. So we have something nice to look at until we do the switch. But it's actually workable. I mean, I think that's one of the things you have to consider is as you're providing technical stuff, you're trying to make people feel at ease and you're trying to give them a sense of where they need to be. I definitely would recommend you can fix these on production side. It's a little hard in Zoom to cue the next person without trying. You can't whisper to people on Zoom. It doesn't work that way. I will say this. One of the things I will jump back to the question of troubleshooting and come back to this. Signal flow. You need to be able to ask yourself, where does it start from? Where is it going? Am I doing any processing in the middle? I don't care what you're working on. You could be working on audio. You could be working on video. You could be working on Zoom, like how you have your laptop connected, what's communicating with what. If you can track all of those steps back systematically, you'll be able to find places in the chain to jump in and make, if you have to make an alteration, you know where to jump in and you need to know where you're going with it at the end point. If you can do that, now you're able to troubleshoot. Oh, this isn't working. Let's take this functional block out and replace it with something else. Oh, my switcher's not working. Okay, can I take a direct feed from this computer and go to my output? It may take a level of your production down a little bit, but you'll have something that's a minimal viable product that you can actually push out. I mean, or you just have a nice workaround. It's one of those things with signal flow, but I will say this with Zoom in particular. So because you cannot whisper to people in Zoom, I mean, you can, it just goes live on the internet and it looks terrible and it sounds
Yeah.
terrible.
If you go to everyone, let's make that caveat. If you go to
Everybody.
Now,
So
you
one,
directly.
private whispers are your friend. Having someone able to wrangle your mutes for you, that it's like a producer that helps with the flow of things, is helpful. That is something that we have found helpful because we are handling switching, we're handling pulling in comments with our YouTube and integration, and we're handling other things. So mute wrangling, and then the final thing is we just made an overlay. I have it set up in the Luma key for the ATEM Mini, and then we also have it downstream on our actual streaming machine. We have an overlay. All I did was go into Illustrator and put in a bar at the bottom and a bar at the top that basically covers all the Zoom HUD the UI. That way, if someone does pop open the chat and send something to everybody, instead of having that orange chat bubble in the middle of the screen, it's covered. As long as no one goes in and clicks it on the computer and opens the actual chat window, it's covered. So even if it does happen, we throw that up, we change the shot, we clear that chat bubble, and we go back. It's things like that, and it's very straightforward to do. All you need to do is have a program that can put out a transparent layer, and you're good to go. Illustrator can do it. If you have like Canva Pro, you can make transparent background images. It's a great thing to put on. It's just a layer that you can do downstream to kind of cover up some of those unfortunate realities of Zoom.
That's not a bad idea. I hadn't considered the overlay, even though I did say we need to quickly answer the remaining questions and wrap up. See, this is just what we're talking about. It popped up on the screen. No, but you're right. It really is time to wrap up. I want to thank everybody for joining us. We do have Jason, who mentioned transition slides with the person's name on it, so that they'll know who's coming next. I was able to set up my ATEM because I do have the Surface with macros. So I have a mute and an unmute macro. So if I have to speak to someone quickly, I can hit that mute macro, say, hey, you're up next, and then I'll hit the unmute. And it makes a huge difference with the macros.
And the first point there, back to our initial topic, which was actually a brilliant idea. It was almost like a mobile units. We're talking about stuff getting wet. There are outdoor events, or they used to be back in the pre-COVID world, outdoor events pretty much every day of the week somewhere on this planet, from soccer, football to football to what have you. A mobile unit, from all sizes, from little tiny transit vans to tractor trailers. Guess what? They're all parked right now. There's no basketball, there's no baseball, there's no football, there's no anything. And those trucks are sitting there, right? They still have to be paid for. Call one up, say, hey, we want to do our outdoor drive-in worship service. I think it's time to be creative, especially if this continues in this capacity for some time.
Yeah. I'll say this, I've gotten requests come in, from some folks at my church about that possibility of doing the drive-in thing. And, for my own reasons, it came down to safety and then just, overall just following guidelines. And, just to be practical about it, I love my church folk, but I also know they probably were going to try to hang out with each other not outside of the car. So let's just do that. But that being said, it's very tough to do. But yes, if you have the resources to be able to do what Colin suggested, it's perfectly fine to do that because, like you said, it'll save the AV team locally that's there at the church. And I'm sure that those companies would not mind jumping in and trying to help out in whatever capacity that they can.
All right. Listen, guys, thanks again. What do you say? 2 weeks from now, we'll do it again?
Yes, and I just remembered what the topic, or one of the topics, is supposed to be. Probably the big one that I would have tuned in to if And I was struggling because I know some churches very much are, is how do we collect the money?
Yeah, money is a huge one. We may have to jump in next week and just do a whole topic on money. I know our church is doing at 3 o'clock on Saturday. We're doing specifically we have this thing called COVID conversation that runs between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. And we're going to just be talking about money, whether it's tithe and offering, how to make money, how to manage the money during this time, what you should be doing with your money. Stimulus checks are coming in, how to distribute it, who do you pay, who you not pay. So I know we're going to be talking about it. As technicians, one of the things I wanted to deal with was how are we making money during this time? Some of us are eligible for PPP, some of us are not. Some of us are eligible for unemployment, some of us are not. We can do a whole episode on that in 1 week's time if y'all want it. So that is something definitely that we can discuss. But it's up to y'all. So
Okay.
listen, thank you, Carell, Colin, and Alex for joining us. This is an us thing with the Church AV Professional Forum. And like we said, we're going to try to do this quite a bit, as often as we can, and so that we can get the word out there, not just about what we know, but we're trying to share knowledge. We're trying to build a community where we share our knowledge. Maybe you guys can help me through a problem. I can help you through a problem. And that way we'll have less problems.
I know you're frazzled at the beginning because you forgot to start with prayer. So Robert, you can close with it.
That's exactly right. Thank you very much. Lord, we thank you for this opportunity. Not just that we can have a successful conversation, but even the roadblocks that you put in our way, which gives us the stories that we can share. Other people have been through these same issues. And the idea is to help others so they don't have to be stuck. They don't have to be angry. We can know that we turn to you, we pray to you, and we can get the answers we need to move on. And you've provided an answer. The laptop messing up didn't stop this production from happening. So we thank you for this opportunity, and we continue to pray to you that you will help us reach out to others and be able to share the information that you've given us. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, gentlemen, and we have a good night. Thank you for all those who are watching. Don't forget to share this with others. Let them know, that we're going to do this quite often. Even we're going to try to do it, especially after the lockdown is over. Maybe we can get together in the DC area one day and really just meet up and talk about these things. So thank you very much and have a wonderful evening.